Hi, Carl here for ProAV TV, and today we're taking a look at the Sony Z190. Now, this is a fixed lens camcorder from Sony which they released alongside their Z280 camera, which we've already covered on this channel, and that is effectively their flagship model for fixed lens camcorders like this before you step up into the world of on-shoulder cameras and things like that. The Z190, if you like, it's the little sibling to the Z280. It's got a smaller sensor, it's got some limited recording options, like it can only do XAVC-L rather than XAVC-I, and it can't do log, it hasn't got gen lock, things like that. It also records onto more affordable media, it records onto SD cards rather than S/S cards, but it does have a longer lens. And so it's not in every single way inferior to the Z280. The lens is actually really good on this camera, and I think that's the first clue as to who this camera is really for. To me, if you shoot any sort of actuality, any sorts of work where you need to record what's in front of you and guarantee that you're going to get that shot, it doesn't really matter how pretty that shot looks like, as long as you get that shot. The smaller sensor, the longer zoom lens, and the affordable media, which you can buy lots of, means that this is a fantastic camera for that sort of work. The lens is a 25 times zoom range, which is a big leap forward over the 17 times zoom range on the Z280, and of course this is because of the smaller sensors on this camera. But 25 times zoom is brilliant. In a full frame equivalent, that works out to be a 28.8 to 720 millimeter lens, which is so useful. I do wish though it was that little bit wider. 28.8 isn't quite wide enough for some of those establishing wide shots, or if you're subject and you're in a really small little corridor or a car, something like that. For those sorts of situations, you are still going to need to get that wide angle adapter out of bag and screw it on the front. There's sort of no real way around that. So I do wish the lens was that little bit wider rather than telephoto. But on that telephoto end, 720 millimeters gets you a long way. And of course, if you're in 1080p, you've got that further crop, 2 times crop in because of its 4K sensor. Because if you're only using 1080p resolution, you've got a 4K sensor, you can crop into the 4K sensor before you start, by 2 times before you start seeing any loss in resolution or quality. And so effectively, rather than a 25 times zoom lens in 1080p, you've got a 50 times zoom lens, which is a 28.8 to 1440 millimeter lens, which is incredible. So for wildlife, for sports, for news, for anything where your subject is going to be quite a long way away from you, this is a brilliant camera to look at. We do get 2 of the main strengths of Sony's Z280 here on the Z190 as well, and that is the variable ND and it's the autofocus system. The autofocus system is Sony's new hybrid AF system, and it's not quite as controllable on these 2 cameras as it is on some of their other cameras, because these don't have a touchscreen, and that is a bit of a shame because it's very easy to control what you want in focus with a touchscreen. On here, really, people are going to be leaving it on to choose the subject for itself until it finds a face, and then the majority of people use that face detect autofocus, and it will just prioritize the face, and if there's multiple faces, it lets you choose between them with the joystick. But even with that, even if it's not quite as controllable as on other cameras, it is very fast, reliable, and accurate, and it's easily usable in professional environments, particularly anything fast-paced like news. It's just brilliantly useful. The variable ND is Sony's biggest strength though, in my opinion. It is absolutely fantastic to have fine control over your ND. It means when you're shooting outside in bright conditions, in harsh sunlight, you don't have to touch your aperture. You can set that at the sweet spot for the lens. You can have your gain down at 0, and then you control your exposure purely through using the ND. And that can be set to auto, or you can manually do it on the wheel at the side. but it's just such a better way of working than having big chunks of ND that dramatically affect your image. Once you start working with this fine control over ND, it is very hard to go back. So on the surface, it is tempting to think of the Z190 as just the affordable version of the Z280. And there are some areas where that might be the case. They've definitely cut some costs down to keep the cost down on this camera. But I think if you're into any sort of actuality shooting and documenting what's in front of you for news, for sports, any of those areas which I've mentioned, the combination of the longer zoom range, the affordable media, and then all the ergonomics, the variable ND, the autofocus, things like that, means that the Z190 is perfectly placed for the sort of work that you do. Has all of the features you need and none of the features you don't. The Z280 is more aimed at factual TV work, straight for broadcast. If you need HLG and log, if you need an intra-frame codec to go straight into broadcast workflows, and you want a slightly larger sensor for the better image quality, the Z280 is the camera for you. If you need to just document what's happening in front of you and you want the best camera possible to do that, the Z190 is the clear choice, in my opinion. If you've got any comments at all, any questions at all about the Z190, just leave them down in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. And if you want to buy one for yourself, of course, just get in touch with our sales team or head over to the ProAV website and the link to that is in the description. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.